The set is simply the location on stage that the action occurs. That's really all it is. There can be a whole range of styles, and it's really up to your imagination, the show, the director, and a bunch of variables as to what you do. I want to talk about design first, because design determines what you build. And I really believe that a lot of people jump into a set design before thinking of alternatives. I think most of you have seen the back of a script where they have the floor plan. That's irrelevant. Okay, that was simply the floor plan they used for maybe it was the premiere of the show, maybe it was the Broadway production. But keep in mind, it was the floor plan for that theater, usually a proscenium theater. It was for that theater at that time with that budget and those people. Wonderful thing about theater is you got to say the words the way the words are written, because that's by copyright. You got to sing all the words, that's copyright. When it comes to set, you can do whatever you want. And so we're not restricted like the actors are. First of all, we have box sets. Some photos here. I did all these except the middle one here. That's 4 Old Broads that was done here. Box set just means, think about a rectangle. And you've got the left and right side have been flared out so your audience can look in. You have the fourth wall, the one right in front of the audience, has been removed, hence the idea of the fourth wall, breaking the fourth wall. So that's a box set. Now, does every box set have to have 3 sides? No, of course not. There's all sorts of variations. When it comes to non-musicals, though, certainly I think in community theater and probably high school, things like that, this box environment is really about the most common. And that's the one that we're going to talk the most about when it comes to construction. But anyway, box set. Okay? That's what they're starting to build here, by the way. I'm pretty sure. This is for Arsenic and Old Lace, right? Yes. If you go to the next page, talks about unit sets. Here you get a little more artsy. A unit set is where you have a structure on stage that doesn't really change, but the cast moves around on it. And each location can be used as a different time and place. It's really commonly used with a lot of lighting stuff, so they use lighting to suggest time change and place change. The top left one, that's just a model that I found. The top right one was Guthrie's production of Hamlet. I saw that. This middle one was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown here at the Barn Theater. So notice you can build a set that people just move around and you can indicate time and place change on that. Multiple sets, and this is more common with musicals. This is where you have a whole bunch of like units that come on and off. You've all seen this. That can be anything from, and I've seen them as big as literally like an entire box set that rolls on and rolls off, all the way down to a couple of chairs. And it can be everything in between, okay? But again, that's why it's real common for musicals, because scenes are changing all the time. Then I just wanted to mention, oh, and by the way, the photos there actually is Christmas Carol that I did in 2014, and I used a multiple set design, and I'll probably reference that again in just a bit. The last one would be the minimal or the suggestive setting. This is where you really pare things down to the bare minimum. In fact, I'd say the top right one, Diary of Anne Frank, is a pretty large minimal set. But notice here, you've just got a sofa. Down here, you got a couple of chairs, little decorative stuff, and that's it. This is really misleading. People tend to think that, oh, great, minimal sets, I can just throw a few pieces on there and it's great. No. Okay, you ever been to a coffee shop, a little cafe, where they've got this random collection of tables and chairs and dishes, and you're just like, oh, it's so cool, it works together beautifully. Well, there's other places you go into that have random collections of all that, and it's a pile of junk. What makes the difference? Well, there's somebody in that first place who has an eye for style. They know how to create randomness that looks good. I'd use that analogy for minimal settings. For minimal settings, you need someone who's got an eye for what works for the audience. It's not just using less, it's using less in a highly purposeful, artistic way. But I need to mention it because it's a very important style. Sometimes it works beautifully. I'm going to make some references. I've been very, very lucky in retirement. I got a chance to see a lot of Broadway shows. One of the worst Broadway shows I've ever seen was Macbeth. And yes, I know the superstition, don't see Macbeth in the theater, I don't care. If you don't know what that is, I'll tell you later. It's starring Daniel Craig, 007, okay? And it was the worst thing I ever saw. And they tried to do this whole minimalist thing, and it looked terrible. It didn't work together, and there was no flow to it. So please don't jump to minimalism thinking I don't have to do as much. No, that's a very conscious design decision. All right, so that's the type of sets. Now let's go back to the front. Some basic considerations you got to think about here. First of all, read the show. Now that may seem simple, and I don't just mean read it. I mean read it, reread it. Give yourself time to mull things over and really think about what can I do here. Certainly you're going to have your initial idea, but ask yourself, is that really what I need to do? Or can I do something different? When I was doing Christmas carols, I took months to get this thing ready. That's the longest I've ever done for a show. Because there's all these locations, right? And I hate scene changes. Oh God, I hate scene changes. And so I'm trying to think of how can I make this work? So what I finally came up with, and it's only because this stuff came to me like in a dream, okay? So I needed time to let this develop. I had a unit right upstage, a square unit, 8 feet by 8 feet on casters, really heavy duty casters with a pivot in the middle. Every side was a different scene. So all they had to do was turn it, and we were in a whole new scene. The bed was on casters. So instead of trying to use lighting to create this transition when the ghosts were coming in, I came up with these little characters called sprites, girls, 10, 12 years old, who took the bed and just randomly ran around stage with it. The point I'm trying to make is, if I'd have just sat down and tried to force my way through the design, I don't think I ever would have come up with that. But because I gave myself time to mull it over, it worked. All right, so give yourself time. Yeah, there's the design in the script, just ignore that. I mean, no, that's overly simplistic. It can be a decent starting point. Please don't let that lock you down. There are so many other options. Don't underestimate the audience's imagination. Audiences are very smart. As a group, I won't say individually, but as a group, they can pick up on time and place movement really well. I've just been watching a show that I think everyone else in the world has probably seen, The Story of Us, if anybody knows this show. What's really interesting is it's set in multiple time periods, but when it moves from one period to another, it doesn't say 10 years ago or tomorrow. It just lets you pick up the clues and you realize, oh, okay, this is where we're at. Audiences are really smart. So don't feel like you've got to make everything blatant. Okay, they can pick up on a lot. Consider your audience expectations. Think about, what does your audience expect from this event? When I did Steel Magnolias. Steel Magnolias is an iconic movie that many people absolutely love. So I knew, look, I got to do something to like play honor to that and to give them the satisfaction that they've seen something. Now, the one thing you never do in theater is try to emulate a movie. You don't ever do that. But I knew I had to pay respect to it. And so that meant I needed a nice full set. I needed Truvy's hairdressing shop. We even did things, it was my decision. You know, in a beauty shop, they'll have the pictures of the different hairstyles. So the actual pictures I put were the original cast of Steel Magnolias. And nobody really even realized it, except I think 3 people for the whole run. But the point is that I knew the audience was expecting to see Truvy's beauty salon. And I thought, I gotta build that. So think about what your audience is expecting. The need for spectacle, okay. I had a director many years ago say something to me, because I was going for more kind of a minimal set thing. And he said, you know, we don't really know how good this cast is gonna be, so why don't we give them a little more spectacle? So in other words, he was saying, I can't guarantee how good the show's going to be in terms of the people, but let's see if we can help that with the visual elements. So there's times where you add stuff because you want to make it look better for the sake of the audience and to support what they're experiencing. And then getting their money's worth. You know, in this theater, right now it's $25 a ticket to come in. For some people, it's not a lot of money. For other people, that's a lot of money. And the fact is that every person in this theater, I don't care if you're sitting here in the middle, or back there, or over there, deserve to have the same experience. And now that doesn't mean they're going to have the same view, but the same experience. So that means you got to design things in a way that no matter where you're sitting, you're getting a comparable, equitable view of the experience. That means really taking into account things like sight lines, which we'll talk about here in a bit. And then you want to think about, is this a show that requires an absolute somewhere, that I kind of just laid out here, or as an absolute elsewhere? In other words, absolute somewhere is where you have a set that has to be very realistic because the characters interact with it, and it needs to have all of these elements. So my description of Steel Magnolias, I think very much is an absolute somewhere set. People need to see Truvy's beauty shop. When I don't know if any of you saw Nana's Naughty Knickers a couple of years ago. It was a show. We had all these cabinets that opened up and all that sort of stuff. The cast literally interacted with the set. So we had to have all that stuff. It had to be there. There's other times, Neil Simon can be this way, where it's a real specific Brooklyn, 1940s or something like that, where it is important to have all that stuff. And the accuracy may be really important. You build a set from 1969, you put the wrong thing on it, I guarantee you I'm going to know it. Okay, that's my childhood. You build a set from 1940, I may not know, but my mom will. She'll know that, wait a minute, we didn't have TVs like that yet. There were no TVs, and so on, okay? So on absolute somewhere, you really want to think about, how can I make this as realistic as possible? Thankfully, with the internet now, too, there's all sorts of research we can do with that. Absolute elsewhere is where you have actors on stage, and what's around them is really kind of irrelevant. It's just a space for them to perform. That's all it is. Where whether it's A, B, or C doesn't matter a whole lot. I remember doing a show called Duck Variations by David Mann. It's all it is two old men sitting on a park bench talking about ducks. I know, sounds boring, it's not. So guess what the whole set was? A bench. That was the whole set. Now, think about this from what I said earlier though. If you've paid $25 for a ticket and you walk in here and there's a bench on stage, might you wonder, wait a minute, what am I paying for here? So again, a lot of this is a balancing act, okay? All right, start with the least and build up from there. Now I'm not talking physically building, I'm talking about designing. Start with the least and design your way up. If you know, Steve just did Bad Year for Tomatoes, is that what the title was? And you had how many doors in that set?
How many doors?
Doors.
One, two, double door, another door.
And did the script require all those doors?
Not really.
Well,
but
you needed doors.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. And the fact is, I mean, you had to
There
have...
are other ones where every door was needed.
Yeah. So what you do is you start with, okay, what doors do I need? Or what things do I need? Farces, Bad Year for Tomatoes, Lend Me a Tenor, other such shows, they're going to have a certain number of doors they need or access points because you have all that thing of one character barely missing the other and all that sort of stuff. Okay, you start with that. Do you need a window? Does the window have to work? Do you need A, B, C? And I mean, really ask yourself, do we need it? Or did somebody just put into italics in the script that there's one present? You really ask yourself, no, is it used? That reminds me, you got that layout on the back. Many times in the front too, you'll have this long italicized description of the set. Again, they may just be describing what the premiere set was. Don't take that as being that's what you gotta have, okay? So anyway, go through and ask yourself, what really is the bare minimum here to get away with? What's the minimum? I've kind of touched on this, to satisfy the producer, the director, the audience, and yourself. The producer, in this case, the Barn Theater. I'm not going to speak for Ashley or Naomi, but if they're paying me to build a set and they walk in and they see a park bench, they might come to me and say, is that it? Really? That's all it is? Now they may think, wonderful, look at all the money we saved on the set. But on the other hand, they have a right to say, is this really what the audience is looking for? Of course, the director. Now, we could go on forever, and I won't, about the relationship to directors. That's why, by the way, I almost always, when I direct, I design and I build. Production meetings are way easier, okay, when it's all yourself. Not to mention, I can make any change I want, and I can get as pissed off as I want at me, but I can't get upset with anybody else. What the director wants, what you are comfortable with, what you feel has been a reflection of your abilities. Maximum allowable, what can you realistically do in your budget, in your time, in your abilities, and in your other resources. Now, I've been in a situation, unfortunately, too many times where I had too much set. And I mean, this is where you start putting in those nights that go till 3 in the morning. This is when you're back at 7 in the morning because you decided, I'm going to have this on stage without realizing, oh my God, this is huge. I'll say this, I shouldn't, but I will. One thing I learned the hard way, this is long in my past, don't design a set after you've had drinks, okay? Because then you agree on the way too much, okay? You want to be perfectly sober when you do this. But really, and I can't overemphasize that part of it, you want to make this a positive experience for yourself, okay? Which means not driving yourself crazy. Not to mention, when you start to overdo it, you do bad work. It's much better to have something simpler that's well done than something big that just isn't really finished very well. So I encourage you to really consider those elements. And always remember that lighting, even though that's outside what specifically this is about, can be used as a set element. And that's where, again, you work with the lighting person or whatever to make sure that you get that all set up. Design and build always from the audience's viewpoint. Now, I don't know how much all of you know about set building, so I'm sorry if a lot of this is repetitive, but you know you have to watch sight lines. One of the things I personally don't like seeing is if I'm sitting up there and I can see over the set, or I'm sitting down here and I see something unusual. So just take into account everybody's view as best you can. Now, we can't control these posts up here, but I can control the angle of the walls and everything. All seats should have a good view, I've mentioned that. Oh, paint and detail for distance under stage light. All right. I'm really bad when I'm detailing a set, painting and all that. I'm doing it from like this far away, right? And I want to make it look good and all that. Well, two things. You got to think about how it's going to look under the stage light, the colored stage light, not just white, but the actual colors you're using. And how's it going to look out there? Because the thing that I'm hyper-focused on when I'm this far away, no one is going to see. So why should I then waste my resource, my time, in working on something that in fact is not going to have any use to the production? So think about that distance thing. Especially when I'm painting sets, I will regularly zip back and forth from the audience up on stage and back and forth just to see how everything's looking. And sometimes it's because things will look really good up close. And then you get out here and you look at that under the effect of the stage lights and you realize, ooh, that doesn't look good. And you have to make some alterations. So keep that in mind. That's, by the way, that's a good point about design. Again, your abilities. I mean, if I'm going to design a set that's going to have trees with realistic looking leaves, well, then I better find someone that can do that, because I can't. Okay, it won't even look like a good cartoon tree. Okay, the set should control everything the audience sees. If you have doors, windows, you got to think about what's the audience going to see beyond that. If you want to keep that reality, I mean, those are the touches too that make the difference between really letting your audience escape the here and now for what's called the there and then. So the here and now is right now in the theater. The there and then is the time and place on stage. You want that willing suspension of disbelief. Well, when they can see some crew member walking behind, through a window, you just blow everything. And it's just, you got to take care of all that stuff. So make sure you do that. The details matter. Small things can have a significant impact. Whether that's the painting or some little touch on stage, or whether stage dressing is the right age or the right fits the time period. There's all of these things that can make a difference. So pay attention to the details. One of the details, I can't think of the exact name of it, for Savannah Sipping Society that I did just before the pandemic hit, there was a whole line in there about this specific type of ivy that was growing up on the veranda. I don't know plants, I know grass, I mow it, okay? And then there's green stuff that grows around the house. My cast made it very, because I brought in like some plastic stuff and they looked and they said, really? That's not even close to what they're talking about. So I realized that, gotta look something, but those details, for people that know this stuff, that detail is gonna totally blow the show if I don't get it right. Be consistent time period, mention that, and it's okay to surprise the audience once in a while. Like little Easter eggs. One of the ones that I just love, Ani, can't think of his last name now. Ani. What's it? Yes. He did Diary of Anne Frank. And I don't know if any of you saw that show. And the picture's in here. Under more the minimalist sets. You can't really tell in the photo, but on this floor, he took, because at this time, in addition to the show, there was also a traveling historical thing that they had out in the conference area out here. And what he did is he came in, and on the floor, on these boards, he actually wrote part of her diary. I mean, what a beautiful set. Now, would most people pick up on that? No. Well, a few, yeah. And that's going to be really cool. So it's okay to have these little details that kind of surprise your audience and take them back a little bit. So that's some of the more philosophical thoughts. Notice a lot of it is balance. The biggest thing I would say, though, is to give yourself the opportunity to think of alternatives. And even if I think of an alternative, I may dismiss it that, oh, it's not going to work. You know, that maybe I really don't want to have all those doors, but after I've read and reread and thought about the show, you know what, I got to have them. Just got to have them. But letting yourself think about what if. I tend to be what's called a very concrete sequential person. I'm a scheduler, I'm a planner. I want things laid out. So I really have to force myself to get away from my first read of, okay, well, the set's obviously got to be like this. No, I know that there's other alternatives, but I've got to make myself pursue them. I can't just, it doesn't just happen automatically. Some of the practical considerations should be easy, distraction-free environment for the actors and the action. And what I mean by that is the set's got to be something that works well for them. That means that if there's steps, level changes, if there's doors, if there's anything that they've got to manipulate, it needs to work well. It's got to be something that doesn't distract from the action, doesn't distract from them. It's just everything's got to work well, okay? So you want to make sure as best you can make it all work beautifully. Of course, you got to fit the budget, materials cost, your time as part of the budget. When it comes to materials, again, I don't know what your experience is building sets. Keep in mind that when we're building a set, we're trying to make it look like something. Doesn't mean it has to be that. I've heard stories before of some, like a high school production, asking the woodshop class to come in and build a set, and they come in with 2x4s and sheetrock. That's not what we do. We're trying to make it look like something. So you're looking for much, much less expensive alternatives. That's one of the reasons, as we'll talk about in a bit, in theater, especially for box sets, well, for a lot of stuff, we use real standard stock sizes. So we can build this stuff and then use it and reuse it and reuse it. I mean, some of this stuff has got layers of paint you wouldn't believe on it. But that's where you try to save some money that way. You try to reuse, you get creative. And so those are very real limits. The time available, that first one, kind of putting these together, I learned the hard way in working with directors, even myself. I needed to have a schedule for the set. That when was the set going to be done? Now I know there's this whole thing about, this rush at the end, final dress rehearsal, you're still painting, all this. Okay, fine, if you want to do that. Here's the thing though. Think about how much it benefits the actors to have a completely done set a week before opening. They've got all these doors to work with. They've got the stairs. They've got everything they need to work with. Yeah, are you going to be touching up and stuff? Of course. But the point is, have a schedule. Let people know, here's what my plan is for the set. One of the things that I try to do is, it's real common before the first rehearsal, you'll tape out the set on the floor. You guys know what I'm talking about? You'll tape it out. So at least when they start to do some initial rehearsal, they know where the walls and stuff are going to be and the doors. I try to get those walls up and at least the door openings up as quickly as possible. Part of the reason for that, if you had a piece of tape here that finally the edge of this, and in rehearsal it's just a piece of tape, people will stand right here, okay? Do we normally stand this close to a wall or a stair? Well, of course not, we stand further away. So the sooner, okay, that's my first alarm, 6:30. The sooner that we can get some actual physical elements in place, the sooner they can get a really good sense of movement and location and all that. Now, that doesn't mean that in 2 days I've got the windows and the doors in. No, it means I've got the walls up, the openings are available, they've got the basics, okay? I just think as much as you can, try to get that as early as possible. Easier said than done, I know that. Okay, I do know that. That personnel available. Sometimes you've got a whole crew. What's interesting to me about that, I taught stagecraft out at the college for quite a long time. And stagecraft is where students come in, take a class in technical theater, and then of course their practicum part is they have to help build the show. I think I could have built the show by myself in half the time. Okay, and so there's a pro and con to personnel. If your goal is to just simply get it done, then you want people to help you that either are very good at following instruction or who really know what they're doing and they can really move along. So there are some pluses and minuses to it. Okay, but how many people you have available could make a world of difference. Part of it is too, in this theater, okay, here you have a 4 by 8 foot flat. And notice, so we've got 8 feet in this theater, you really want to have 10 feet because of the sight lines, that's real common. So the question becomes, how much help do you need to put all this together? And when are you going to do it? And all this sort of stuff. So again, if you're going to be designing a set that really is going to take 2 or 3 people to build, and you have no clue where this help is coming from, you may have to make some really serious rethinking about what am I going to do here? Because you got to be safe in all this too. I can't tell you the number of times, put it this way, if you don't bleed on it, it's not a good set, right? But you really have to be a little bit careful here about safety and all that. So anyway, personnel, your ability to simply do this. I can build a box set and make it look really good. I'm good at that. You asked me to build a rock. Yeah, that's not going to happen. You know, the whole chicken wire, muslin, glue, it'll look like a pile of muslin and glue on stage. Whereas I know people, I wish I had those pictures with me, I almost included them. I had a show at the college. I didn't design this or build this, somebody else did. We literally had a lake, L-A-K-E, like water. We had an entire thing about the size of the front of this stage. And then this guy, he brought in sand. It was set on a lake in northern Minnesota. He brought in sand. He went to a tree farm and bought pine trees, cut them down, brought them in. And then he built these like a cliff. And it was the 2x4s and chicken wire. And people could climb on the cliff and had these places they could sit and perform. I could never have done that. And so if I had thought, hey, this would be a really good design, then I'd have to find someone that could build it for me. So again, think about what you can realistically do. Yeah, YouTube and stuff can give you a lot of stuff. Most of you have done something like this where you watch a YouTube video and think, oh, it's so easy. And then you go to do it and you realize, I have no clue. And so, yeah, think about, you got to be realistic. Plan for strike when building. You know, strike is when you take everything down. That means when you put it together, you've got to think about how easily is this going to come apart. Remember, this set only exists in its totality for, in this case, at the barn for 2 weeks. And then it comes down. So think about how you're putting this all together. So for example, here at the barn, I think it's pretty standard, we use Torx for everything, right? If you're familiar, Torx bits they're kind of like a star shape, if you're not familiar with it. We use those because they don't strip out very easily. So we can use them, reuse them, reuse them, reuse them. I put everything together on my sets with either Torx bits, or if it's going to be something more, I can't have a screw head, I'll use a staple gun, an air gun. But by putting in those screws then, and only putting in the ones I need, Steve and I were talking about this before this thing started, you don't have to have 8 screws to hold 2 flats together. A couple of screws will do it, because then when it's all done, you can take this thing apart quickly. A set that'll take you 6 weeks to build will probably come down in about 2 hours. And you want to prepare for that and think about it. Don't use nails. I can build a whole set and never touch a hammer, okay? Because it's just not the sort of stuff. So plan for strike. Safety. I know this is something we don't often like to talk about. Seems kind of hokey in a way, but you got to think about safety. You got to think about safety in a number of ways. Building. Some of you are much younger than me, and for you to get up on a ladder and lift up a 2x8 flat and put it up on top of a 2 4x8 flats is really not much of a problem. If I were doing it now, I've got other ways I do it. I put on braces so I can slide it into place. The point I'm making is, am I in danger on an 8-foot ladder compared to you? Yes, I'm assuming. Okay. I need to think about my safety and do it. If I hurt myself, who have I put at risk? The producer, the barn. Okay? So I've got to think about, not to mention if I hurt myself, then, well, who's going to finish the set? Who's going to do all this? So, got to think about safety. Think about safety for the cast. When they come into rehearsal and you've been working all day, you're going to have sawdust, you're going to have stuff spread out. You got to clean it up. Because I remember, I've seen at least twice in my years, you have cast members that come on stage and you'll tell them, don't take your shoes off. You know, we've been working. Well, but they want to go barefoot because of whatever. And yeah, I've had a couple where they've gotten screws or nails in their feet. It's my job to create a safe environment for those actors. And sweeping up and cleaning up is absolutely no fun, but you have to do it. Make the set safe for the production. Now, what I mean by that, behind all these walls, you're going to have supports, right? Don't have this support that you say to the actors, oh, by the way, when you exit in the blackout, duck. Now, wait. Now, I don't care. You can put a yard of glow tape on. When they come off this stage after a blackout, they are blind, period. They can't see anything. So if you have anything back there where it's like, be sure you step over this block. No, they can't see it. So when it comes to things like stairs, one thing that's very important as well, notice nice consistent riser, tread depth until you get to the bottom step. The bottom step is 1.5 inches taller. Now, if I'm coming down these steps, I'm in the middle of, I'm performing, and my energy's up, my adrenaline's going, and I'm focused on, and suddenly I get to the bottom and I've got an extra 1.5 inches. Could that throw me off? Yeah, big time. And so even though it's a pain to make these adjustments, sometimes you have to build it from scratch. Things like that. Your steps have got to be equal. They need to be pretty common height. And in the U.S., a common rise is 7 inches, common depth is 11. Things like that, where, again, you're trying to create a really safe environment for everybody involved. So as you build your set, there may be times where you have to go the extra mile to figure out a bracing system that people can walk under without having to worry about it, which is actually not too hard to do. I've done it many times, but think about stuff like that. Now, there's also, though, nothing wrong with having parts of the backstage that are off limits. In other words, there's no reason the cast ever has to go there. If this wall I've got up on stage right has got braces to the floor, There's no prop table back there. There's no costume changing going on. There's no entrances. There's no reason for anyone to be back there. Then it's okay for me to say, don't go back there, because you could hurt yourself. But otherwise, I know I'm kind of harping on this, folks, but I've seen it so many times. People trip, all sorts of stuff.
Do you put glow tape on the ground so they could follow a path?
You can do that, but realistically, glow tape is really only going to help people that are entering. And the reason for that is their eyes are so dilated when they come out of, or so, no, constricted, when they come off stage, that even a huge chunk of glow tape is not, they're not going to see it. Okay? No, you don't get glow tape that big anyway. But can it help people come on? Yes, because then they can follow the glow tape, because their eyes are used to the dark. Okay? But going off stage, one thing I've seen, by the way, and you may have seen some of this too, is where that when somebody exits, there's an assistant literally standing right there that takes them by the hand, especially if they're doing a quick change, that may literally take them by the hand and pull them or guide them to exactly where they need to be, because they can't see anything. So really think about that safety thing. Got that. Clean and safe. Okay, that's all clear. One thing I just want to recommend, I've started doing on my smaller cast shows, is I create changing areas right backstage. I call them a stable, because literally it's a row of changing areas. And it's not just a space that people can take clothes off. It's literally, it's got more privacy, it's got a curtain up, they can put whatever they need in there, they can have all their costumes. So like in this theater, to get to the dressing room, you have to go downstairs. Here, they can literally walk back, and here's the key, it's a private area. When I did, Savannah Sipping Society, that's 4 adult women. I mean, all of them were, I think, at least 50 or older. I don't think any of these women, even if all the doors are shut, really want to be changing clothes in the open back there. They want that privacy. It makes them more comfortable. When I did it for Steel Magnolias, it's something that takes you a little bit to build, but if you got a lot of flats, you can do it. But it really this is where you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is supporting the actors to make the show the best. Seems like a little thing, folks, but it's really great. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's what it looks like. Yeah, use the internet. It's just a great resource for getting ideas. Keep in mind, I'm not saying go online and find a set you like and copy that. But if you think about it, musical artists, they know the music everybody's producing. I mean, everybody keeps track of this stuff. So to go online and look at, okay, well, what other kind of sets have there been for A Bad Year for Tomatoes? And not necessarily that you're going to do that one, but they might have something on there that, oh, yeah. When I did Nana's Naughty Knickers, and we had to have all these cabinets opening out, these hidden things. And the biggest one was a bookcase, and I kept seeing this bookcase coming open like this, thinking, well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? And I'll be honest, I went online and just looking for what have other people done with this. And I saw one that the bookcase, instead of swinging open, it did this. And the first time that happened, I still remember that. I get a chill out of it. The first time that happened, the audience saw that, we got applause. Just because of, and people just laughing, okay? But honestly, I got the idea from looking around and seeing what other people are doing. So definitely take advantage of that.
That was a fun set.
Oh, it was a great. There's a picture of that on box sets. Yeah, this third one down. So that bookcase that you see up center, that whole thing actually flips up from the bottom. And as it flipped up, the whole story basically is this older woman is selling lingerie for older women. I mean, like sexy stuff, okay? And as it flipped up, all this lingerie was just hanging down. And so they saw teddies and all this sort of stuff, and it was just really cool. And the way we did it, by the way, the whole thing was on a pivot. The stage manager had a railing he just grabbed onto, and he just pulled back, and the thing just tilted up. We had it counterweighted and all that. It was really cool.
We also had the fireplace slid out.
Oh, and the fireplace came out. Yeah, just a bunch of other
Shelf
stuff.
came out, I think, too.
What's that?
A shelf came out, didn't it?
The mantle flipped open,
Yeah,
and we had the pictures opened. We had underwear everywhere.
yeah.
It was fun. So, in terms of design, I really thought that was important to go through because, again, the design is where you decide what you're going to build. And really, there are times where the best set may be the least. Or you may be looking at building, oh God, if you ever do Noises Off, if you know that show at all, it's 2 stories. And I mean, it can turn, oh God, it's just, yeah. So let's stop there about the design part, and then we'll talk about building a bit. But any thoughts, comments? Oh, I wanted to show them the thing. When I talked about, what something looks like, Steve just did this for Bad Year for Tomatoes. I want to just point something out about this.
We had the whole fireplace.
Had a whole fireplace done, and something he did here is such a little thing but makes a world of difference. Notice what he did. He just did this relief carving in this styrofoam, right? So when he puts it up, all he has to do is just this handful of glue spots and maybe 3 screws in the whole thing,
Yeah.
if that.
That's all.
Now, if it had been me, and this is where, again, you learn something all the time. What I would have done is I would have taken this styrofoam, I would have cut out each of these rocks. Now, what am I going to be spending 2 days doing? Putting rocks on a flat. I'm just a ton of glue. When the show's done, that flat is trash because you're never going to get all that glue and stuff off. And yet here he just did a simple different, something a little different. Worked beautifully, pop it off, you still got flats, you've got this that you can keep. Just a great example of thoughtful execution. One of the most frustrating things you'll ever deal with are directors. We're a pain in the butt. I've had directors, especially ones who want to make changes. I should talk about this just a bit. So you start off and you got this design, this idea of what you're going to build, and you get rolling on it. Sometimes you've got to have a heart-to-heart with the director when the director says, oh, hey, can we add, all it's going to take is just a little paint flat, maybe a little wheel, then, and he talking like this is a 25-minute thing. But this is 2 days of work. Not to mention, I need to go buy X, Y, and Z, and I got to find someone who can paint it the way you want. So there's a point in that process where even if the director comes to you and says, hey, can we add this? The answer may have to be no, because you're just out of time. We do try to work with stock sizes of everything. So for walls, standard is a 4 by 8 foot flat. And why is it 4 by 8 foot? Well, because the sheeting comes 4 by 8 feet. And as a result, then you can buy it, you can build a frame, you can build it quickly and easily. They're very lightweight. They're called Hollywood flats, by the way, because if you ever see a set for a Hollywood show, this is exactly what they're made of. And we build them in these 4 by 8 dimensions. A standard is 4 by 8. We try to work in at least 2 foot dimensions, so 2 by 8, 4 by 8, something like that, 4 by 4, 2 by 2, because that way now I've got a Lego set. I've got this set where I know that I can make all of these combinations, and I can build this in whatever way I want. Does it always work out perfect? Of course not. I might have overlaps, things I got to work with and all that. But keep in mind, one of our jobs in terms of design and building is managing money. And one way to do that is to have, hopefully in the theater, pieces that can be used and reused and reused. So, if you're building something from scratch, one thing to think about is, well, if I need a 3 by 8 foot flat, I might ask myself, well, can I just use a 4 by 8 and then just kind of have an overlap that no one ever sees, because it creates an item that I know that I'm going to save after strike. So that standardization, that reusability is crucial for money savings. The ideal show is that when you strike, there's virtually nothing in the garbage. So we've got flats, we have platforms. Here they use a platform that's got a 1x6 with a 1/4-inch plywood top on it. The other thing that I don't know people do as much anymore, this has got the buffalo board underneath, doesn't it?
Oh,
The brown stuff?
One of them has the masonry board on it.
So between the plywood and this frame is something on this one, it's called buffalo board. It's a brown board, it's a 1/2 inch thick, and it's really been used on houses for insulation. They would often put it on before they put siding on. Unfortunately, it's not used in construction that much anymore. Now, why do we put it on? Because when people, if you think about this, you put a piece of plywood on the wood frame and walk on it, it's like a drum head. It's going to be noisy. You put something on here to deaden it. There is another material I've worked with, it's a foam material, about the same thickness, that can have about the same effect. Right? But think about, how are you going to deaden sound? The other way I've seen them made is you have the frame, you have the top, but then you put the sound deadening on top, and you wrap the whole thing in muslin. And then that way you've got the sound deadening up here. I'm not a big fan of that, only because if you've got a character in high heels, you're going to have holes all the way through that thing. So anyway, notice again, 4x8. There's 4x4s back there, there's 2x4s, there's 2x2s, there's angled pieces. Again, very stock sizes though, because I know when I design what I've got to work with. Now, am I going to build some other fill-in pieces? Oh yeah, I'll always do that. But hopefully there's going to be very few. One of the reasons, by the way, that this 1x6 is popular is because of this stack you see here. This is basically the height of the step. And so you can just stack them up and have people walk up. It's still a little bit short, but it can work for that. And so notice what they've done here, and this is what I mean by the Lego thing. So they needed this height. So here they chose to use this cribbing, which works beautifully to get the exact height of what you want. You just build it, set it on there, so it's building kind of a wall. Here, they just stacked up a whole bunch of platforms. This is a really smart idea. Have they saved some 2x4 by doing that? Well, of course they have. And so, again, it's a money save. If these platforms are just going to sit back here during the show, why not bring them out and use them?
Another thing you can do with stacking is bringing one piece out here and bringing another one back this way, and that creates steps.
Yep.
And you're still solid.
One of the things, too, to be a little careful about on stacking stuff like this, they are heavy, so you think everything's going to stay exactly where you put it. I wouldn't count on that. I've seen them where they'll start to work off just a little. So, and this one's fixed because you've got these. So notice how this 2x4 is going to keep them lined up, and it's going to keep them in the right place. So you want to be just aware of things like that. Something else about this cribbing I want to mention. And this is something else you've got to think about in designing. This is more of a technical theater issue. So you've got this platform. Now let's say you've got two people standing up here talking. This will probably be just fine. How about we put 4 people up there dancing? You have a whole different dynamic going on there. And so, and again, they're not doing that in this show, but imagine that were happening, or you may have been to shows where they've got people on on a walkway 8 feet high, going across back and forth. So part of your job is to not only build, but build for the action. Build for what's going to happen up there. Even on something like this, if I've got 5, I mean, it's up again, this is all stable now. But if this is more freestanding, if I had people going back across, there's a danger this stuff can start to loosen up. So what I would do, if it was me, simply, I'd put an angled piece on the underside going here and an opposite on the other side. So just, again, think about those things. You don't want anything that's going to fall apart, be loose. The other thing that I like that they did, if you come around back over here, I'm just really impressed that these are on here already, okay? Very often they don't come on until the end, but I want you to notice something about them. First of all, if you grab them, they're very substantial. I have built plenty of sets, and I'm embarrassed to say it, where we had to tell the actors, don't touch the handrail because it was wobbly or whatever. The purpose of handrails is safety, okay? So you want to make, and granted, these are backstage ones, but it, you know, goes for the front as well. The other thing I really love about these, that to me is a safety issue, they're exactly the same. So the handrail on the left, the handrail on the right, same height, same angle, same, even to the point of, you know, this extra piece sticking up. So that means as they're coming off here on the show night, when they're blind, they know that either side is exactly the same. Assuming this is in place for the actual production, that it's also up far enough in advance, they're going to be so accustomed to this, it's going to be like in your own home, getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and you can feel your way there. It's going to be the similar idea. All right, so we've got our standard flaps. By the way, notice this one's built with 1x4s on the side and 2x4s crossbeam. I've seen them also just 1x4 all the way around. You can build them in a number of ways. We've got the platforms. Those are the two major stock things that we use. If you look behind you now, you'll see the racks where we've got on the bottom platforming. And the barn did a very smart thing a long time ago. The very bottom platform has got casters on it, so the whole thing just rolls out. You can move it out, stack them up, move it back, works beautifully. Then all of these are flats up here. And again, you just basically pull out the Lego that you need and just start putting them together. We normally assemble them with those screws like I talked about. Oh, and also these sort of units, well, you would all look at stuff like this. You also do, by the way, anchor them in the floor. Now, depending on where you're doing a show, I remember at least one place I worked, when we mentioned screwing into the floor, they were just aghast at the thought. But the whole idea is if you don't anchor the bottom in the floor, it's easy for that wall to get kicked. And I've actually stood backstage at, I remember it was Man of La Mancha, and held a flat because it was already had been knocked this way. And so we had cast coming in and out, so I had to hold it until intermission so we could fix it. So you do put a couple of screws in the floor to make sure that they stay in place. This floor is designed for it. Some of you, if you're working in high school, you might have what they call a hard floor and a soft floor, where the front part of the stage is a highly polished, nice, almost like gymnasium type floor, but then it transitions into a soft floor that you can screw into. So then, of course, we've also got, most of these are downstairs though. We have things like door units, so that it's a door frame, just like you'd buy at the store. When you paint a set, you got to do two things. You got to paint it, get it to the colors, the base colors that you want. You have to go back and texture it. And that means you're adding different highlights and lowlights to give it some visual depth. Otherwise, it looks cartoonish because it looks flat, because it is flat. So for example, when I get into a corner, I will go in there, I'll darken the corner, and then just kind of gently kind of fade the darker out so it enhances the depth of that corner. Steel magnolias, I used up all the extra thin material back in the shop because I wanted siding on the house. Well, then we went, so it was only about a 1/4 inch thick. It was like lap siding. So what you do then is you go back with, I think I used nothing more than a black marker, and just lined under each one of those laps. And it made it look deeper. But that's the detail stuff with painting that's really important. Building it is one thing, painting it is a whole other step. Also, when you get to that point, allow time to paint. Give yourself several days. You got layers to put on here. You got texturing to do. It's amazing how long it can take. And this is also where there's people you may know that they would be miserable building sets. They would kill themselves. They would beat their hands up. But you give them a paintbrush and ask them to do something, and they're, a virtuoso. They know exactly what they're doing. Then, okay, after painting, you're gonna dress it. Dressing just means adding all that stuff. So things on the walls and all that. And that's where ideally you've got a prop room that's got some of this. Now, of course, we got all sorts of secondhand stores. You can buy stuff cheap. There's all sorts of people anxious to get rid of crap in their house. So you put the call out, especially if you've got a bigger show, that we need fill in the blank, whatever it happens to be. And you'd be amazed how much of that stuff will come in. And they'll make it very clear, you're happy to use it as long as you don't give it back, okay? They just don't want it back. Really think about that detailing, even things like, if you've got a door that opens into a kitchen, yes, you're gonna have a wall there, you're not gonna have a stove and all that stuff. But when that door opens, virtually nobody has just a blank empty wall. Put a calendar on it, put a picture on it, put a something up there, put a collection of spoons, I don't know. But just something so when it opens, there's this sense that the house continues. And of course, like I said before, you want to try to make the look as consistent as you can in terms of time period, in terms of decor, all that sort of stuff.
The screws, you're talking about minimum amount of screws and what it takes to tear it apart and take it all down. Keep in mind, when you're putting screws in, don't push them in so far that you can't see them anymore. Leave them showing like this one is right here. Leave it showing so whoever's taking that set down can find it, will take it right out. Also, if you strip a screw, pull it out before you're done building the set. Pull it out right then and there, put a new screw in. Don't leave those strip screws in there because it'll take a lot of time in tearing the set apart.
That reminds me of, I think, a very important point when you're building. You're often going to have people helping you strike that did not help build it. So the more consistent you are in how you build it. So if they know that every time Steve builds a set, he's going to attach 2 flats together with 3 screws, and I know that. Or he's going to have 2 screws in the floor, or he's going to have 2 that go into the flat above. Because then I can predict, okay, I know about where these things are at, and I can take them. So to go and just start randomly sticking stuff in, don't do that. I mean, try to be methodical about it.